The information that we give you is only good for today. It's actually only good for this hour. Things change so quickly, as you all know. So if anyone looks at this recording and it's not March the 31st, be advised that the information probably is not valid anymore. Because as I said, it's just changing constantly. On the federal level, the CDC extended the eviction moratorium. It doesn't really affect New Jersey at this point. New Jersey's eviction moratorium that currently exists is more stringent than the CDC's, and the CDC moratorium specifically says if any state has a more stringent policy, that policy governs over the CDC moratorium. So the one good thing about New Jersey is the CDC moratorium doesn't apply. The bad thing is that it's worse in New Jersey than the CDC moratorium. So that's kind of where it stands on a federal level.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it.
Back to Janelle.
Back to the host, back to the MC. No, I appreciate it. And because of it's where we're at, we'll see what happens with that, and we'll keep you guys posted on it as things unfold. But I am now going to turn over the mic, so to speak, to Matthew Bradley, who was our resident New Jersey expert. So take it away, Matthew.
Picture it. There's a place, a magical place. It's dark. People are unhappy all the time. Tenants are running around, making excessive noise, not paying their rent, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. And that place, ladies and gentlemen, is called New Jersey. It is a wasteland of landlord-tenant law. As most of you know, if you've talked to me, you know this already. I'm going to review the state of affairs in New Jersey, and then I'm going to give you the information that I have regarding this phase 2 of the rental assistance program. And Paul will be able to jump in on that as well. So as it stands in New Jersey, there are about 60,000 pending landlord-tenant complaints in the state. Obviously, they are divvied up based on county. So obviously, if you're in Essex County, it's going to be a lot more than if you're in Hunterdon County. But it's a lot of complaints. The Executive Order 106 that started the moratorium on the actual lockouts, that keeps getting extended. So the executive order from the governor said that nobody can be locked out of their apartment or house or wherever they're renting for 60 days after the end of the declaration of the health emergency. The declaration of health emergency keeps getting extended every month for 30 days by the governor. So the most recent extension took us to April 19th or thereabouts, which means that June 19th would be the soonest that a lockout could occur. However, as all of you know, we've got other issues, which are that the courts remain closed down for landlord-tenant matters, residential and commercial. And that is as a result of the New Jersey Supreme Court Directive 2020, which came out in mid-July. That's what's shut the courts down. The only way around the court shutdown is by way of an emergency application called an order to show cause. I've discussed orders to show cause before, and I've discussed them with all of you, or lots of you, in a one-on-one scenario. For those of you who haven't heard it yet, it is an emergency application. It's an involved, time-consuming, rather expensive application. And based on that, I have been giving you my thoughts on the probability of success, because there's no sense in spending that kind of money if there's not a good chance that we're going to be successful. I will say that my sister always says this, not to toot my own horn, but beep, beep. We have not lost any orders to show cause that we have filed and got a hearing on. So our batting average is pretty good on those. You can get an order to show cause through for specific circumstances if it's an emergency circumstance. So criminal activity is one. Drug activity is one that's a possibility. Really severe disorderly conduct, destruction to the property. No non-payment of rent cases count as emergency applications unless the tenant is deceased. If the tenant's deceased and the rent's not getting paid, that's grounds for an order to show cause. So the way it works is our office first files the complaint like we normally would. And then I follow that complaint up once it's been docketed and gets its docket number. I follow that up with the filing of the order to show cause, asking the court to give it an expedited adjudication. And then they'll give us a hearing, hopefully. And at that point, we have two hurdles. The first is to demonstrate one of the 18 good causes for eviction. And if we clear that hurdle, then we have to demonstrate that the cause for eviction that we've demonstrated constitutes an emergent circumstance. So if we demonstrate that there's excessive noise, we could get the first hurdle, but if the judge doesn't determine that the excessive noise is an emergency, we still lose on the order to show cause, and then the judge will just throw the complaint back in the pile for when the courts open back up. I have told you this before. Don't forget, Executive Order 128 says the tenants are allowed to use their security deposit towards rent. If they give you that request in writing, they have to repay the security deposit within 6 months or at the next lease, or within 6 months of the end of the emergency, or at the next lease renewal, whichever comes later. For those of you who have talked to me about this, I suggested, in order to give that requirement some teeth, that we make it a lease addendum, that the tenant realizes that now a term of the lease is that they have to repay their security deposit by X date, and failure to do so is a material breach of the lease, so that we have some sort of enforcement mechanism down the road when that juncture comes. Also, I've been telling you this if I've been talking to you: do not offer new leases to people that have balances, particularly if it's a high balance. The case is Montgomery Gateway versus Herrera, and it says that you cannot evict someone for non-payment of any rent that was due previous to the most recent lease renewal. Now, I want to be clear, they still owe the money. They're still contractually obligated to pay the money, but as you probably know, in New Jersey, it's two different courts. Landlord-tenant court is only for the possession of the property. If you want a money judgment, you have to file in special civil part or law division. So while the tenant may still be responsible for $25,000, if you give them a new lease, the non-payment complaint for eviction is only able to include the payment, the rent that's not been paid since the most recent lease renewal. So for that reason, I've been advising you not to give lease renewals to people with balances. Having said that, there is a caveat. If your property is one that also tacks on a month-to-month fee, you cannot refuse to give them a lease renewal and then tack on a month-to-month fee, because you're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. The month-to-month fee from a public policy standpoint is, if the tenant refuses to sign the lease, it's a penalty of sorts. But if you're the one refusing to give the lease, you can't penalize them for your refusal to give them the lease.
Matt, before you go on, do they have to non-renew the lease? Is there a notice they should be sending out at the end of these lease terms?
No. In Jersey, a non-renewal of a lease is literally a waste of paper.
Okay.
In New Jersey, you cannot renew somebody, but you cannot non-renew somebody. A non-renewal is not one of the 18 good causes for eviction. There's case law on this. Well, you don't care what it is. It's Harris versus Community something. Anyway, the case
He's worse
law
than
says,
me.
Yeah, he is, with the citations.
I'm just creating a smoke screen that I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So
I'm sorry, can I ask a question on that?
Is the question whether I know what I'm talking about? Because the answer is
No, I have a situation. My name is Tina. I'm over at the Muse. I'm Monmouth County.
okay.
But I actually do have a resident who owes a significant amount of money, probably anywhere from like $6,000 to $7,000. She has used her security deposit, but I also did notice that she has not had the utilities in her name for over a year. And her lease renewal is due May 1st, which by us with tax credit, we have to have the lease renewals done 30 days prior to the lease. So since she's gotten notices and whatnot, but she has until April 1st to pretty much send me the paperwork to finally close out her file. So she's already gotten filed on for non-payments. Will she also be able to get non-compliance?
Yes, so that's a lease violation. Her failure to comply is a lease violation. In New Jersey, that's going to fall under subsection D and E1, and that requires a notice to cease. Then you have to wait a reasonable time. Usually 30 days is a reasonable time. And then we can send her a 1-month quit. And then when the 1 month quit period runs, then we can file to evict for the lease violations. That's the good news. The bad news is that's not going to rise to the level of emergency. So once we file, the case is going to be docketed and put on the pile, but it's not going to be one that a court is going to adjudicate on an expedited basis.
But you
Okay,
do
so
want
I
to go
could-
ahead, you want to go ahead and send that stuff over to Diane to do the notice to cease and the notice to quit so that we can get that done and get in line and get into that pile. And also
Okay.
so dotting your i's and crossing your t's in the meantime, okay?
Of course, yeah, I'm definitely gonna send over the paperwork and whatnot. I just wanted to make sure, because like I said, she's already been filed on.
For the
She's also
non-payment,
gotten for non-payments, and then she's, obviously.
And I'm going to make you feel a little better. $7,000 is nothing anymore. Actually, Tim, our attorney in Philadelphia, had a case the other day where he got a judgment for $33,000. So I'll make you feel a little better anyway.
Okay. All right,
Um,
yeah, it's just, like I said, she has been making payments, but my boss is just saying,
Yeah.
so.
No, we got you. We got
This
you.
is
I just wanted to
probably
make
a
sure I questioned it.
conversation.
Okay,
Yeah,
We should
and if
probably-
anybody else has questions, just if you could throw them in the chat, guys, and then that way I can ask them once Matt's done whatever he's doing, we'll kind of interject them. But in the meantime, Matt, Alicia asked you to just
Yes.
repeat with
Yeah,
regard to
Go ahead.
the, yeah, I'm sorry, Alicia, I'm assuming you wanted to repeat with regard to the non-renewals, correct?
Just
Yes.
give me
Go ahead.
1 second. I want to finish the last two thoughts.
Okay.
So Tina, I think, was the last person we were talking to. Call into the office so that we can have a conversation, because in general, you don't want to accept lease payments after a notice to quit has been issued, because there's a case, Jasontown Apartments versus Lynch, that says that could be interpreted as a waiver of lease violations prior to the acceptance of rent after the notice to quit. So weighing our options is something we don't need to do here, but we can have a conversation about the best way forward on which path it makes the most sense. And if I can back it up one more, that community real estate versus Harris I was talking about, that case has language in it that says that basically once a tenant in New Jersey signs a lease, even if it's for 15 minutes, the court calls it a perpetual tenancy. So they are in forever unless and until they leave on their own, or you can demonstrate one of the 18 good causes for eviction. And so that goes back to our discussion about not renewing versus non-renewing. But I wanted to finish those two thoughts. So Alicia?
No, she just wanted to make sure that, can you just repeat about the not renewing? So
Well, because I'm doing this now, so I need to know, anyone that's coming up for renewal that has a balance, I need to know what to do to get rid of. that.
nothing, don't send them a renewal letter. Just
Don't
make
do
sure you're not
anything.
sending out a renewal letter, that's all.
All right. Okay,
And then they're going to become a month-to-month tenant under the terms of the last fully executed lease. And then, that keeps their balance not only due and owing, but it also keeps it as grounds for a complaint to be filed on non-payment, so that once the courts start hearing non-payment complaints, they can, it'll be adjudicated.
Okay, so back up, we're getting multiple questions about tax credits, because on tax credit properties, and I'm assuming this is gonna be the same with any type of, subsidy base as well, they have to renew the lease yearly. They have to go through in order to stay in compliance with the IRS, they have to renew the lease. So what happens there on those renewals that have to happen, Matt, on, either property-based or tax credits? What do you
So
do in those?
If the tenant refuses to cooperate, I mean,
No,
we
no,
don't have-
if, not that, they're saying if they have a balance.
Well, so in a case like that, I think the best way to go about it would be, because the Jasontown apartment case that talks about waiver, and also the Montgomery Gateway that talks about acceptance of rent, it's two different paths. So the Jasontown apartments is more of a subjective. And so if we issue a lease renewal because we have to, I think the way to go about that is to include a letter with the lease renewal, copying, if there's any kind of housing agency involved, we want to copy them also, and specifically state that this does not constitute a waiver, and that the lease renewal is being offered only because it's required by federal law. And that should cover us as far as the Jasontown waiver argument or analysis. However, I would still advise going forward, I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's great. And so guys, on those tax credit properties, we'll put together a waiver, a letter that says that, And any of you can reach out to Diane, Matthew, we'll get that put together. We'll give it to Di, and Di can disseminate that to anybody who might need it for those renewals. Does that sound good?
Yeah, all except for the Matthew part. That sounds great.
Nice try. And then someone's asking if they owe rent and they do renew, does that in essence waive any monies due from the prior release if they're not tax credit? Yes,
So,
that's what he's
well,
saying.
Well, okay, I want to be clear on this. It's nuanced, okay? It does not waive their contractual responsibility to pay you that money. They still owe you that money, and you could sue them in special civil part or law division for a money judgment for that amount of money. The difference is when you file a non-payment complaint, as you know, on there it says the amount of money the tenant owes is blank. You can't include money from before the most recent lease renewal in that number. So you can't evict them for not paying anything before the most recent lease renewal, even though they still owe it to you contractually.
All right, guys. So, and then they're saying, can we just offer a month to month? No, don't offer anything. It'll just default to a month to month. You don't want to make that offer. When you make that offer, then you're offering them a new lease, even if it is just a month to month. So just let it default to the month to month by law. Okay. And then on the, if you've already offered the month to month, we'll talk. All right, Alicia, let's talk after.
Well, yeah, I mean, it may not be the end of the world. I mean, this is also something that has to be, I mean, I'm giving you this advice because I know that this is the law and the right way to go. And I know that when I was on the other side, arguing for tenants, Montgomery Gateway was one of my favorite cases because I used to get stuff thrown out all the time. But I mean, if some tenant walks in there, they haven't talked to an attorney, the judge is in a hurry and nobody catches it, then, you know, it may not be the end of the world. But yes, like Janelle said, we can talk on a case by case basis.
Okay. What if an agreement is weekly in a rooming house? Again, same thing. Just let it keep defaulting the week to week till we can get them out if they're not paying. This is only for people who have balances. See, this has always been the law, but it's never really been an issue because as soon as someone skips a month, you're calling us and we're filing on them. And it generally doesn't tend to overlap with them, you sending them out in lease renewal. This is all coming to a head because it's been a year plus at this point. So of course, all your renewals have been going out and these people have large balances. That's the problem here. So just don't let the renewals go out on the people who have balances. All right. Especially large balances. They owe you $200, whatever, but okay. All right. Moving on. I think that's it for the questions.
Okay. So I just had one more thing before I go to the assistance, and that is just a reminder, no self-help evictions. I have been getting more landlords that are getting antsy, and I understand that, but I cannot advise you. I've talked to a couple landlords that keep, you know, when you're a kid and you ask your mom and she said no, so then you just ask your dad. Yeah, so it's like, I'm getting people saying, well, can I just lock the door? And I say no, and then like a week later, I get another call. Well, I have this tenant, can I lock the door? It's still no. It's a disorderly person's offense. You're looking at fines. Do not lock somebody out on your own without court process. So as far
then,
as
yeah, somebody has what happens if the health emergency never gets lifted then. I'm
Well,
sure at that point NJAA and various other people will get involved and there'll be a lawsuit. I'm hoping at some point soon. The problem is with the federal government continuing to do it, as Paul was talking about, it's kind of making it such that Jersey has a leg to stand on right now. So, but eventually we hope those legs to stand on won't go away.
yes, and like I said, remember that we have two obstacles. The first is the New Jersey Supreme Court's directive. That's what has shut down the courts. The governor's order hasn't shut down the courts. The governor's order has just said if somebody goes to court and gets a judgment, you can't lock them out for 60 days after the emergency ends. So there are two issues going here. I'm going to tell you what I know about the phase 2 emergency rental assistance. If someone could wake Paul up, he also may have some information on this. And so if he wants to interject, when we talked about it earlier, he said he was going to do color. And as not being a sports person, I didn't know what that meant, but he explained I'm evidently the play-by-play guy, and he's going to do the color commentary. So anyway, phase 2 is now, is as of the 22nd of March, which was last Monday, applications are being accepted for phase 2 assistance. The state program has $350 million in federal stimulus money, and that's for the statewide assistance. And then another $230 million was specifically earmarked for 14 counties and 2 cities. So that's additional money for those counties. They are Atlantic, Bergen, Burlington, Camden, Essex, Gloucester, Hudson, Mercer, Middlesex, Monmouth, Morris, Ocean, Passaic, and Union County, and then also Jersey City and Newark. So those places have additional funds. The applications can be submitted online, and they're going to be, they can pay up to 12 months of rental arrears, and also future rent up to the extent that funds are available. 3 months in the future, again, if funds are available, and up to 6 months if the household qualifies as very low income, which I believe is less than 50% of the median income in that particular area. Once the applications are filed, they're thrown into a randomized lottery, and the funds will be distributed from there. Landlords can file on behalf of their tenant as far as the pre-certification, pre-application process. But obviously, if the tenant is selected, they're going to have to cooperate in submitting all of the documents that are required. Resident has to be 18 years or older, a Jersey resident. They have to qualify for unemployment or be able to show a reduction in household income, or they have significant medical costs or a financial hardship due directly or indirectly to the COVID-19 pandemic. They have to demonstrate a risk of experiencing homelessness or housing instability, and they have to be at 80% or below of the area median income. DCA is going to encourage landlords to enter into payment plans for rental arrears that aren't covered by the rental assistance program. Although, again, the rental arrears that can be covered by this program only go as far back as March 13th of 2020. So if they owed money before that, that's not going to be something that this program will pay for. In order for the landlord to apply on behalf of the tenant, they got to get the signature of the tenant on the application, which can be an electronic signature. And they have to provide documentation of the application to the tenant to let them know that they filed on their behalf. And let's see.
Matthew, while you're looking, is there a website that I can put in the chat for people to apply to?
Yeah, yes, let's see.
I'll put it in there, Janelle.
Thank you, Diane. That's awesome.
And yeah, I think, go ahead, Paul, if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, just a couple of things. So the way it works in New Jersey, and it's probably one of the worst states administering the funds through the federal government. Most of the other states don't require all the paperwork that New Jersey is requiring. They're not going through a lottery system. There are a couple other states that are doing that. The rest of them are just saying you go ahead and you apply, and then as long as you get the application in time, you'll get the money. There is a lot of money that's available. As Matt mentioned, it's $583,000 between the money that's going directly to the state and the money that's going to some of the counties and a couple of the cities. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. That's,
I think million.
yeah, thank you. 580, what did I say?
1,000.
Oh yeah, 580, what's a couple zeros? Especially nowadays. Now we're talking like trillions. So. By the way, did you know trillion is a million? Just throwing that out there for those who haven't figured it out. 12 zeros. It's insane with how much money was appropriated with the different stimulus packages. But aside from all that, so what you have is in New Jersey, there is an initial application that is done, like a pre-application. It's very simple. Fill out. You don't have to give all the information at that point in time, and the landlord can do it on the tenant's behalf, as Matt said. But that just puts you into this lottery system. We're hoping that in the next week to 2 weeks that New Jersey is going to start divvying out the money. They're waiting until there's enough people in the lottery system so that the money essentially is going to be used up through the lottery. Although what's going to happen is that once people get picked, then they have to provide all this documentation. Now, again, all the other states or most of the other states are saying you don't have to do this documentation anymore. It didn't work with the first phases of rental assistance. So we realize that it's a nightmare for tenants to start uploading all that information. We're not going to require it. New Jersey, being New Jersey, says, no, we're going to require all this information that the tenant's going to have to upload. So what's going to happen is a lot of tenants aren't going to be able to do that. They're not going to qualify. That money will go back into the pool. So there'll still be money that's going to be available. So even though the applications may have been closed as far as the lottery system being picked, still encourage your tenants, if they haven't done so prior, to still submit the pre-application, because there will probably be additional money that's available. The money that Matt's talking about and that I'm talking about is money that was appropriated through the Consolidated Appropriation Act. In March, the American Rescue Plan, the 1.9 trillion, I got that right with the 12 zeros, was passed, appropriating additional funds. That's going to be an additional $466 million that's going to go to New Jersey. It's a lot of additional money. We don't know yet what New Jersey is going to do with that additional 466 million. The federal government has said that the states can now appropriate up to 18 months of rental assistance. So as Matt had mentioned to you, under the plan currently, it's for up to 12 months of rental assistance. So we don't know if New Jersey is going to take the additional money like other states have done and say that if you've already qualified and get the 12 months, then now you can qualify for the additional 6 months that's allowed, or they're going to take that $466 million and just allow additional people to get the 12 months. So we should know that in the next day or so, which is why I was saying to Janelle, yes, things change every day. So we're hoping that tomorrow we're going to have an answer to that question. So we'll know how that's going to be appropriated. As I said, there is a lot of money that's available. So if you have tenants that owe money, highly recommend that you figure out how to get in touch with them and get them to apply for this assistance.
Okay, so while you're on that, couple questions that are kind of pertaining to that, can they apply now? When does this start?
So it started on March the 22nd. Now, here's the tricky part, one of the tricky parts. Okay, if you have a county or a city that has over 200,000 residents, you can apply. When I say you, the county can apply for the assistance on their own. And Matt had mentioned all the counties that have done that, as well as the two cities, Jersey City and Newark. Those funds are administered separately from the state. So if you're in one of those counties, you have to follow that county's rules for getting assistance. All those counties are different. We don't have time to go through what each county is doing, especially since it's all going to change tomorrow after they figure out what to do with the additional money from the American Rescue Plan.
Okay, so a couple other questions. Does this apply to HUD properties as well?
Great question. So if you have a HUD property, you can still get this assistance, but you can't get double assistance. So if you're getting any type of HUD funding for any particular month, you will not be able to get this assistance as well for that month.
Okay, great.
Okay, so it gets a little tricky because if for some reason you don't qualify, something happened, you're not getting the HUD funding in a particular month, believe it or not, this funding would probably kick in.
And if the tenant's not cooperating, is there anything you can do?
You can't force the tenant to apply for the assistance. If they don't cooperate, you're basically not going to be able to get the money. On the flip side of that is, as you know, in New Jersey, you have to accept any type of rental assistance that the tenant has. So if the tenant is applying for this rental assistance, you as the landlord have to cooperate so that the tenant's going to be able to get the assistance, but you're going to want to do that anyway because you're going to get the money and the money goes directly to you as the landlord.
And yeah, Alicia, that's what we're talking about. You can file on behalf as a landlord, but you have to get the tenant's signature, and then the tenant's going to have to cooperate on the back end.
And just so you know, you're only applying on behalf of the tenant to enter them into the lottery system, which hopefully they'll get picked, and then they'll get assistance.
And if they don't cooperate, document everything, all the emails, because then when we do get to court, we can show that they didn't cooperate, and that's only going to help us. I know that seems like a pipe dream right now because we haven't seen a courtroom in 13 months, but it will only help on the back end. Okay. Diane put some wonderful links up. A couple of them she got from somebody on here. So thank you so much. She put up the initial link, the NJDCA, but then there's a couple other resources on there that she put up. So thank you to whoever gave that to Diane. They're up there. We shared them with everybody in the chat. All right. So if you guys just want to kind of bookmark those or whatever, it's wonderful. From Samesh from Westover. Thank you, Samesh. That's great. All right. And then one other question that didn't really have to do with this, but has anybody appealed the New Jersey Supreme Court directives? Has there been any lawsuits with regard to that in New Jersey?
No, not that I'm aware of. I know there have been challenges to the Executive Order 128 regarding the application of the security deposit, because that basically is contrary to the Security Deposit Act statute. Obviously, as you've heard of, the federal stuff is being appealed in various places. I don't know of anybody who has appealed the Supreme Court directive because, I mean, first of all, it's not a statute, and I guess jurisdiction over the New Jersey Supreme Court would either be the Third Circuit or maybe the U.S. Supreme Court. I mean, it would be an undertaking, and so I don't know of anyone that's done it. I mean,
And the problem you have is by the time it works its way through the court system, this will all hopefully be over.
We never imagined we'd be here 13 months later, but
I had to hesitate on that.
Trust us, guys. Nobody's feeling this impact more than us as eviction attorneys. Okay, we have explored every avenue we could possibly explore with this to see if it's worth it. So,
And these challenges have been made across the country, and for the most part, just about every one of those challenges has been overturned. They've lost. There's been a few wins, but they've been very sparse. Not a lot of them, and they're very inconsequential, nothing major. The CDC decisions, we thought was going to be a big deal. We thought that was going to stop the CDC from issuing a new order, but as you can see from the new CDC order that came out, didn't stop them. They just extended the moratorium through the end of June, even though there's two federal court decisions, two federal courts, Third Circuit appellate courts that have said that they had no right to go ahead and issue that. So
apparently in
lawsuits are
Texas,
very difficult.
they're still, because of that decision, I belong to a couple different groups and they're doing lockouts down there. So I think it just depends on where you're at. They're
Yes.
basically snubbing their nose, but unfortunately, New Jersey is not Texas. In fact, if there was ever a polar opposite of Texas, it is New Jersey. So we're kind of SOL here, guys. Just for clarification, is it a waste of money to file for non-payment of rent, or should we get the ball rolling? We don't believe it's a waste of money. Here's the problem. As Matthew said, there's 60-some thousand cases of the backlog. They are going to hear those cases in the order in which they receive them. So the longer you wait, the longer it's going to be until you're heard once things open back up. Get in the pile, get in line. Okay. You definitely want to get that ball rolling. That's our opinion. You can go ahead and wait, but the longer you wait, the further down in that list you're going to be. Plus, in some counties, and Diane could probably tell you which counties more than I can, they're doing Zoom settlement conferences. Now, they're not binding, but we have, been successful in getting payments or payment arrangements made with these tenants, getting on paper, and then the tenants, can stick to those payment arrangements and it gets some money in your pockets. So certain counties are going through their dockets that way. We believe once things open up, that there's going to be a step in there where settlement conferences are going to be mandatory first. There's just too high of a volume.
Yeah, and along those lines, just off the record, that's coming to New Jersey in a big way. Settlement conferences, you're going to see in the next month or two that's going to be mandatory across the board.
Not just COVID related.
Yeah. So on the settlement conferences, Burlington really seems to be at the head of the curve. They started the settlement conferences first, I think. Salem's doing them, Morris County's doing them, but at this point, they are voluntary. So if the tenant doesn't want to enter into a settlement conference, they don't have to. We were on a Zoom yesterday with Judge Harrington in Burlington County. This sounds a little unbelievable to me, but he said they've settled 70% of their backlog. through these settlement conferences. I don't know, that seems kind of high to me, but that is what he said, so.
You got to remember, there's a lot of pro se landlords, and they probably were able to take care of all of those, you know? Like
Yeah,
the small guys.
And in response to the question of whether or not you should file, one of the things that the tenant's going to have to do to get the rental assistance is show a risk of homelessness. And one of the ways that they show that is through an eviction notice. So having the eviction being started will allow them to get the rental assistance. And as Matt said, once it goes to a settlement conference, one of the things they're going to be pushing for is to help the tenant to get rental assistance so that they aren't evicted.
Yeah, so definitely get in line, guys. All right, I think that's it on the questions. Matthew, do you have anything else?
I don't think so. I say this every time we do one of these. I got to get this filter changed. It makes me look like I'm losing my hair, and I know that's not the case.
You've got the same filter as Paul.
I know.
You need my filter.
Yeah, we don't have a makeup crew like you do.
Not a makeup crew, I have a lighting crew. There's a big difference. All right, guys, we will try and do another update once we have some more information. Like Paul said, there's going to be some more information regarding rental assistance coming down the pike. And if it changes significantly, we'll do another Zoom. If it's just some quick information, we'll shoot out a mass email like we do with regard to these Zooms. This will be recorded. So anybody who needs them, who needs to view this that weren't able to get on, anybody from your team, just reach out to Marley in my office. We'll make sure that the recording gets into your hands so that you can disseminate it. Okay. And anytime we have an update, guys, you'll either get an email. We send out an email blast, either whether it's from a federal standpoint or, we send it to just Pennsylvania or New Jersey, depending on who it affects. And if it's significant where it takes 45 minutes like this to explain everything, we'll do another Zoom. Okay.
All right, one last closing joke. So William, I see you're on the call. I stole your joke in the beginning. Do you have any last closing jokes for us?
No, just it was well executed. Congratulations.
All right. Take
Well,
care,
you are
guys.
the new guy. You are the new guy. I cannot believe you're already feeding him bad jokes. Okay.
It was our first encounter, and we decided to trade barbs, if you will.
All right, have a great
All
day,
right.
guys.
All right, guys. Bye. Thank you.